Andrew, did you attend Yale?
I did not.
I also did not attend Yale University. I probably couldn't get in. I know I couldn't get in. I had to take my ACT 3 times to get into college. Well, on today's show, we're interviewing a Yale professor who has made the most popular course in the history of Yale.
The whole history?
Yale's been around for 300 years.
That's a lot.
And this woman has created the most popular course in the history of Yale. And this music kind of sounds like Yale. Come on, why would they cut the music out? I had the whole Yale vibe going. It felt kind of regal. Perfect. All right, now without any further ado, back to our interview with today's guest, Dr. Laurie Santos, who joins us to share about psychology and the good life.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrive Time Show.
Now, 3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here.
Yes, 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 and yes, Thrive Nation. I am so excited about today's show. Z, and I mean this sincerely. There's a lot of shows where I get excited. I get fired up, and you know that.
I do know that.
But I would say probably once a month, I will say something like, this is going to be my favorite show this year. Once a month, I make that statement. Do I not?
Yeah, it's kind of like your cycle. I mean,
but right now,
just once a month, you're banned. This is it. And especially when you get the confluence of what's going to happen here.
But right now, this
Yale
is
University.
Listen to this. Dr. Laurie Santos, okay? She's a smart person. She's a doctor, okay? She's a Yale professor. Now, you know, Z, I took my ACT 3 times. So I couldn't get into Yale or Harvard. So what I do is I buy the case studies put out by the Harvard Business Review, and I read them. I buy them for $7, and I read them like 7 times so I can figure out what the first chapter's about.
Amen.
And I can't go to Yale courses because they have standards and ethics and, things like that.
Well, things
this
like
lady,
that.
listen, this lady right here, this woman, this incredible person, she is going to tell us about the most popular course in the history of Yale. Dr.
Wow.
Laurie Santos, welcome onto the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, I don't want to paint you into a corner by asking a specific question about this, but roughly how long has Yale been around? Just to give the listeners some context, because Yale's doing well, and you've been leading the most popular course at Yale. How long has Yale been around?
This, I think it's 317 years just this year, so it's been around a while.
And could you share with us maybe some notable people that graduated from Yale that maybe our listeners would know? Because, again, not everybody listening to the show knows a whole lot about Yale.
Yeah, well, George Bush, John Kerry, like half of presidents, many of the Supreme Court justices, it's been around for a while. It's done pretty well.
And the number 1 course in the history of Yale, Psychology and the Good Life. Why do you think your class has taken off like it has?
Yeah, well, I think, students on campus are not as happy as I remember being when I was in college. We're dealing with this so-called mental health crisis where students are just stressed and anxious and depressed, and much more so than they have been in a long time. In fact, things like rates of depression have doubled just in the last 10 years. And so I think students are just looking for, a way to feel less stressed. And they like this idea of having a kind of scientific approach to what would make them happy. I think that's what drew them to the course.
Now, you would be happy as a professor. I might get a passing grade from you because I did a bunch of research to get prepared for the show here. So, Laurie, I'm going to read you some fun facts that I have found. And if you don't like my facts or you want to refute them, and maybe you say, these aren't facts, these are just your opinion. But I have found, according to Psychology Today, the average American is being interrupted on their smartphone 85 times a day. Does that sound accurate to you, do you think?
That sounds pretty high, but I bet that's accurate.
And Nielsen now reports the average American, and I'm going to put links to all this. So, Andrew, let's make sure we put this on the show notes, that the average American now spends 11 hours per day interacting with their media, or their social media, or their text messages, and much of that is not a positive thing. Does that sound real?
That sounds correct. We're just like interacting with technology and not other humans much more than we ever have been.
So in a world where people are interrupted 85 times a day, where people are spending 11 hours a day on their media, where people are, the last 2 years, for the first time in American history, the life expectancy of humans has gone down due to suicide. That one I did not know. So in a world where people are getting more depressed, the more time they spend on their phone. The more time you spend on the phone, the more depressed you are. In a world where this is happening, what kind of things do you teach in your class, and how do you help your students become happier?
Yeah, well, the main thing we teach in the class is just this idea that our minds lie to us about the kinds of things that make us happy. In other words, we have these intuitions about, if we're not in a good mood, here are things I could do to feel better. But by and large, those intuitions tend to be kind of off. We think when we're not having a great day, like, oh, I'll plop down and, watch some TV, or I'll scroll through my Instagram feed and so on. But it turns out that those intuitions are leading us astray. They're causing us to do behaviors that are systematically going to lead us away from happiness. And we're doing that in some ways at an opportunity cost of the kinds of things that really could make us happy. Taking time to be a little bit more social, taking time to kind of count your blessings. Even healthy practices like exercise and sleep are kind of going away in the modern age, in part because we don't realize how important they are for our mental health.
Nash, Gnash, he wrote a song called I Hate You, I Love You, which I was listening to in preparation for today's show. And he says, I'm always missing people that I shouldn't be missing, referring to this thing where people go on social media and they look at people they no longer talk to, and they kind of compare lives and that kind of thing. Is that a bad thing we shouldn't be doing? Should we not be going on social media when we're depressed and comparing our life to somebody else?
Yeah, well, there are hints that, especially when you're kind of not in a great state, going on social media isn't going to necessarily bump up your happiness. There's suggestions that, depression and things like that are correlated with the amount of time we spend on social media. And there's been a few studies that kind of force people to go on social media for different amounts of times, and you find that they tend to feel kind of more depressed afterwards. And I think it's especially bad for people who are prone to kind of social comparison. So if you're the kind of person that if you see somebody's vacation photos, they're going to make you feel bad about yourself, then you're especially susceptible to kind of the negative effects of social media.
Now, Dr. Laurie, yesterday, as a case study for you here, I decided I was going to turn my phone off yesterday and track how many messages I would miss between Sunday morning at 4 a.m. when I woke up through Sunday night at 10, just so I could give you stats. So here they are. I missed 34 Facebook updates, 40 emails, 11 calls, 27 text messages. Now, the one thing about the 40 emails is that's kind of misleading, because one particular woman emailed me 16 times, according to Jonathan. So actually it would be 56 or 55, but I'm just counting that as one because it was the same thread over and over and over. So if I'm out there I'm in that doom loop where I'm getting emails, texts, Facebook, interruptions, and I'm just constantly frustrated, I'm somehow depressed, I'm being less happy than I was when you went to college, kind of allow us to peek into your class. Pretend that we are attending your course. What kind of tips would you give us to become happier humans?
Well, one would be to try to do all that social interaction that you have over text and over phones in real life. One of the clearest pieces of evidence we have about what makes people happy comes from social connection. Every available survey of happy people suggests that they're more social. They hang out with more people in real life. And that's both friends and family members, but also just kind of, random strangers. Just sort of making connections with the people around you seems to matter. So that would be kind of one of the biggest things. The second would be to find ways to be more mindful. Another problem with technology is that it's stealing our attention all the time. You could be kind of savoring a good moment, enjoying a nice cup of coffee or a dessert or something, and then bing, your phone kind of drags you away. It drags your attention away. And so another tip we talked about in the class a lot is to take more time to be mindful. Do exactly what you did, shut those alerts off so you can pay attention to the things in real life that are enjoyable and that you're really kind of able to savor if you could pay attention.
This is crazy. Inc. magazine had a stat that showed up, and I'm putting this on the show notes here. Inc. magazine says that when you get an interruption via text on your phone, it takes you 23 minutes to regain your thought.
Mm-hmm. And the most amazing thing, just like with this idea of our minds lying to us, is we don't notice it, right? Like this ping comes and you look at it and you think you're focusing back on your task, but that's just not the way human attention works. It takes us a while to get back mindfully attending to what we were paying attention to before. And again, if just your numbers on a Sunday afternoon, which is probably not, maximum time for you to be getting all these texts and emails, right? That's a lot. That's so many things that are stealing our attention away from life in the moment, which is the thing that makes us happier.
Now, Charles Kolaw is in the studio right now. He's Charles, how tall are you?
6'4".
How much do you weigh?
About 255.
What's your body fat percentage?
About 7.
He's a massive, massive man, Dr. Laurie. We worry about him. Very strong guy. And his wife's with him on the show. They built the business together, Kolaw Fitness. It's a multi-million-dollar Jim. And Charles, you had a hot take or a question for Laurie before
Yes.
Dr. Z begins the interrogation of the great Dr. Laurie Santos.
Well, Dr. Laurie, Clay has been our business coach for a couple of years, and that was one of the first things he did was basically make me shut my phone off all day long. And I tell you, it was one of the best things. Like, I was like, are you kidding me? There's no way I can run businesses in multiple states and run all these
I remember
systems.
this.
And it was like super overwhelming. He's like,
I remember
no,
this.
you just do what I tell you. And I shut that thing off.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
Shut it down to Funky Town.
All day long. And within like 3 days, I was like, I am not chewing my nails. I'm happier. I'm having better relationships with my wife and my kids. So it was honestly, and he helped me with other systems and stuff, but it was running more efficient, better, and I wasn't like held hostage emotionally with business. And
So, Laurie, what
interruptions and so on.
advice would you have for somebody who's in your class who realizes that they need to detach from things that don't matter, like Charles did? What advice do you give your students if they recognize they're in the doom loop of unhappiness? What would be maybe step one to making somebody more happy?
Well, I think, step one on the technology thing is try some baby steps for disconnecting. One of the quick solutions I give students, they're on social media, Instagram and Snapchat and things all the time. I say, just take the apps off your phone. You could still log on with your laptop or something like that, but it takes you, a couple extra steps. You're just not doing it automatically. And it turns out that even that can pull you away from the sorts of social media that's making you less mindful. It's like just like start with baby steps and then try to be mindful and notice. Like I love this example of, at first you're thinking like this is going to be awful, but then a few days in you're noticing like I'm not biting my nails, like I'm much more mindful, I'm present with my family. Like if we can start noticing the differences that our behaviors make for us, that can make a big difference in terms of whether or not we're going to stick with them in the future.
Now, Z, you are a 54-year-old beautiful man, just a beautiful man.
Just turned 55. Actually.
55, really?
Yeah.
You just did?
Well, every year apparently I get a year older.
Frick. I knew this would
crazy.
happen.
Happy birthday.
So here's the
thank
thing
you.
is you're a 55-year-old guy. You own multiple businesses. Dr. Laurie, he's invested in a bank, and he has an auto auction, and he has the largest optometry clinic in Oklahoma. You don't want me to say. I'm just giving you context. So you have a lot going on. And Z, you have helped teach me about, hey, you just turn your phone off. You just keep the old phone in the old car, put it in the old, keep the phone in the. I remember you telling me one time, you said something like, we were doing a man cave thing, and it was a little thing you said, but it's just a little thing, and it helped me. But you're like, I give you permission or whatever you need to hear to just keep your phone in your car or whatever that is. And that like totally fixed my marriage, like huge. But it was like, I give you permission.
I
You
should
said-
have charged you for that.
I know, but you said just.
I may have sent you a bill. I don't know
No,
if you
I
ever
was like,
paid.
I was like,
don't
see,
know.
with thousands of customers, people are always upset. I'm sure you always
Sure.
have one upset customer.
No,
How do you deal
never,
with it?
never,
And you said, I
never.
give you permission or whatever you need to hear to put the phone in your car. And I'm like,
Sure.
ooh, I'm writing that down. So what questions would you have for Dr. Laurie? Because you are living the life that she is teaching her students to live. You have self-actualized. You live the good life. You travel. You have thousands and thousands of
It's like
customers.
I took her class and she didn't even know I was in
You've
there.
had millions of customers
I
throughout your
snuck in.
career.
I was that dude.
in.
I was that dude at the back that you kept going, is that guy, is he in my class?
Who is that
Who
climbing?
is that guy?
Who's in the back climbing
Yeah.
underneath all the desks?
Dr. Laurie, sometimes I see these young people and you talk to them about their phones specifically because their phones lead to the apps, which lead to so
What?
many interruptions,
What?
which
What
lead
were
to
you
this.
saying? What?
And there's a part of me that almost feels like, and now you've been around this, you teach this is an everyday thing for you, that there's an addictive component to it. And whenever you get to addictions, dealing with those and trying to help people get over addictions, whatever they're addicted to, we got a little addiction
Hey,
music
real quick.
here.
No, real quick. Hey, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. I was on YouTubing.
Oh, there you go. So that's what I'm saying. So how do you feel that can be a thing? And so how do you have kids deal with that?
Yeah, well, addiction, I mean, the scientists have these very, very specific definitions of addiction. And I think in some cases, some people fall prey to it, not everyone does. But definitely everybody with their phones has something else that can be really problematic, which is a bad habit. And the thing about habits is like you don't have to think about them. They just kind of crop up. It's like brushing your
Sure.
teeth. Like, you brush your teeth every day. You don't have to think about it and make a decision. Should I brush my teeth or not? It just happens. And I think even more so than addiction, what happens is our phones are good at kind of hacking our habit loop, right? They become habits in our life so that, when you wake up in the morning, you have the habit of checking your phone, or, as soon as you finish an interview, maybe you have the habit of checking your email and so on. And these habits just lead our behaviors astray. It means we're not paying attention half the time, and it's like dragging our behavior in one direction.
Laurie, I'm
And I think
sorry.
that's-
I'm sorry you were telling me something and I couldn't hear it because I was going on Facebook and YouTube and Snapchat and Emo and Skype and LinkedIn and Viber all at the same time. Do you see this in your class, Laurie? Do you see this in your class? When you're teaching this to your people in your class, do they do this kind of crap to you sometimes ever? Were they actually in your class, as you're teaching about disconnecting, do people in your class do that kind of crap? I'm so sorry that I rudely interrupted you. I just wanted to demonstrate the
it's not just the people
jackassery.
in my class, it's
Okay.
me too, right? Sometimes when I'm giving these lectures, I'll be up there talking about this stuff. I often have my phone out. It's often my clock in this big concert hall where I teach, and it'll be like, ping. I have it on vibrate, but I can still see it vibrate. And even when I'm teaching the class, it's hard for me not to do it. And that makes sense, right? It's just part of our human nature to turn these things into habits, to allow them to feel really rewarding to us. So it's hard to let go.
Paul Graham, who is one of the he's the guy behind Dropbox and Airbnb and Reddit. But before that, he built a Via Web, which he sold to Yahoo, essentially the first online shopping cart. See, this guy sold it to Yahoo for $49.6 million. And I'm putting this on the show notes, but he was explaining to a group of tech people at a conference, and then he tweeted it out to clarify what he meant, is he said, I've never carried an iPhone. Mm-hmm. And they asked, what do you mean? You're the guy who's inventing Dropbox, Airbnb, Reddit, and the first online shopping cart. I mean, you... And he sent out a link to an article, which all of our listeners can find right now, which is in theguardian.com. And it says, our minds can be hijacked, the tech insiders who fear a smartphone dystopia. And it pointed out that the head key people at Google, Twitter, and Facebook, the people who made the technology, intentionally made it addictive, which is why they don't use smartphones. So the heads
and they don't let their kids use smartphones either.
Correct.
They don't let their kids use the apps that they've created.
Yes, and we interviewed the gentleman who wrote the book. I'm such a horrible person. It's a yellow covered book, and it's called
How to Break Up with Your Phone. Is it that one?
No, I probably should read that one. It is.
That's a great one.
It's the one. Oh man, it'll come to me in a minute. But Nir Eyal. Nir Eyal is his name. Nir.
I like her title better. I mean, I go, hey phone. I got some news for you.
Hooked is what it's called. Hooked.
I got some news for you, phone.
That was very romantic of you. It was called Hooked. And Hooked explains in the book, these people have actually coded out websites to make it addictive. So when you go to a casino, and ding, 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 that someone thought about that.
Pablo's dog.
It's a thing. It's a thing. So Dr. Laurie, I want to attend your class, but can anyone get in your class? Do you have to pay to go to your class? Can people who are out there listening, can they buy your book? How can people learn more about these things you're teaching? Because we all want to go to your class.
Yeah, well, there's two ways you can do it. One is you actually can take the class online for free. We've put it online on Coursera.org. It's called The Science of Wellbeing. So you can plop on there and take it, full Yale class for free.
Well, okay, what was that again? What was that website again?
It's Coursera.org, like
Coursera.
Coursera, Coursera.
Got it.
And it's called The Science of Wellbeing. But more relevant, since all of your folks are listening on the radio, is that we've also turned the class into a podcast, because we're finding that, people learn stuff with audio. Who knew, right?
Right.
And so we just started a new podcast called The Happiness Lab, which teaches everything that we cover in the class, but in podcast form.
I have never been to Yale, again, because they have standards in class and these sorts of things. But could you share with us your career leading up to Yale? Like, how did you get to be a professor at Yale? Did you, did you go to a course?
Did you lose a bet?
Did you lose a bet? Did you win a bet? Did you high five the right person? How did you walk us through your path before being a Yale professor and how you became a Yale professor?
Yeah. So I actually grew up in a very working class neighborhood, went to a big public high school. Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but was smart. I was the nerdy kid who got good grades, at the big high school. And so I applied to a bunch of schools, wound up getting the most financial aid from Harvard, as one does. And so I ended up going to Harvard, and I was completely clueless when I went there. I was not I didn't grow up in a town where people went to Ivy League schools. So I kind of, took my licks sort of figuring it all out. But that was where I ended up starting to do some research, at schools like Harvard. Like, you can work in people's labs and you can learn about what research in psychology is like. And I started pretty early. I needed a job kind of to, help pay, for books and stuff. And so I started pretty early on working in a lab. And that was kind of where I learned, oh, this is so cool. It feels like psychology, you think of it as Freud and throw you on the couch, but actually researchers are studying these big questions about, how do we make decisions? How do these apps steal our attention? Like, how do we understand what it means for humans to be special and what makes us unique? And so started early on doing some research and kind of liked it. And next step that made sense was to kind of go on and, do some graduate work in that, and kind of did that. And, I guess the rest is history.
Now, New Haven is the home of Yale, I believe, New Haven. Can you describe what it's like to be on the campus? Is it does it feel like, does it feel kind of regal and sort of like we are important, we are future presidents here? Does it feel like that, or does it feel like an episode of Billy Madison? Does it feel like you're watching Billy Madison? Does it feel like you're Dead Poets Society? What does it feel like?
Honestly, it feels like Hogwarts. That's what the students compare it to. It looks like we're just stepping out of Harry Potter. You get these old kind of buildings, these big sorts of spaces. There's no magic, but I think, students on campus with these kind of oldish looking kind of brick buildings, that's kind of the way people think of it here.
Now, as a professor, what does it feel like to know that you have the most popular class in the history of a school that is 381 years old? 317 years old?
No, 70.
317.
317. Yeah.
317. My bad.
Yeah.
What is it like to have the most popular class in the history of a school that's been around for 4,007 years?
It's humbling. It's really humbling and kind of shocking and a little bit surreal. But I think it speaks to the content of the class, that these students really want some answers about what they can do better. I think, it's not me, it's the content of the class that kind of drew them in. And I think, they really want to be happier. They're looking for a scientific approach to do that.
If some semester the class overfills, or you cage fight to find out who comes in. What do the kids do? They Indian leg wrestle in the hallway. What's the move? You only fit so many in, right?
Well, that was kind of what happened, was that, the university realized there was such demand, and they said, we don't want to cap this class. We want to let everyone in that wants to take it. And so we at first started teaching the class in a big chapel on campus, because that's the only spot where we fit. And then we kind of got way past the size of the chapel, and we ended up teaching the class in the concert hall. Everyone joked that if we got any bigger, we'd end up teaching it in the football stadium, but luckily we didn't get that big.
Well, maybe you will after this podcast. Let's just drive everybody to it.
I think once you're on Thrive Time, it really just kind of shoots your numbers up.
Oh, yeah.
Now, real quick, Laurie, I want to ask you this. What's going on with your football team? Do people actually go to the game?
They go to the Harvard-Yale game is a big one.
How many people go to the average Yale football game? I just want to know. 7 people?
There's like a lot of these diehard fans who do the tailgate. I think there are many more people at the tailgate than
Give
at the
me an
actual
approximate. I know you're one of the smartest people we've ever interviewed, so you have to tell me, what's an approximate number of people do you think are at that stadium?
Maybe like 1,000 of the diehard fans will show up, on a good game. You, by the way, what's the largest number of people you've spoken in front of about this happiness course? Well, we get, upwards of 1,000 or 2,000 people, in a single audience. But, the amazing thing is we put the class online. We now have 400,000 learners taking the class.
Wow.
So online, it's, a ton of people are learning this content.
That is so cool.
See, I was Googling her and I found out, you've been featured in the New York Times, a lot of big publications. Do you think your hair has anything to do with it? The hair, just great hair. Is it the hair?
Great hair.
Thank you. What's funny is when you put yourself out there, especially as a woman, you get lots of negative comments. And in addition to my voice sucks and my voice is really terrible, I often get just like emails from people who be like, your hair sucks. And I'm like,
no,
really?
us dudes, we get it. Oh, we get them too. That's not gender specific. It's.
I love this.
Now, I've got a really hard-hitting, serious question for you.
Yeah.
So when Harvard plays Yale, who are you cheering for? Doctor.
First off, do you even know that the game is going on? That's the question. Do
Well,
they
she
even,
said,
do they,
that's
do they
the one
even announce
game.
it out at the school? Do they even
She
tell
was
people
an
there's a
undergrad
game?
at Harvard.
I know
That's
she
where
is. I'm just
cut her
asking. Do they even mention
It's
it?
a fair question.
Okay.
Okay,
fine.
Are you wearing blue or are you wearing burgundy?
These days I'm wearing blue, and it's mostly because I'm ahead of college now, so I'm like a dead
'Cause they
mother
pay
to
you.
students. So
know.
yeah, they pay me. You
know who sides. You
Good
know who
move.
butters her bread.
Nice. Now, Charles Colon, do you have any questions, or Amber? Amber, do you have a question for Miss Laurie? Because, again, you are living the life that she's describing here by intention. You guys are very intentional as a couple, and you make your life better every year. Do you have any questions on behalf of the listeners? Because you've gone through this path, Amber. You've actually done this. You've gone through the process of optimizing your schedule. Do you have any questions for Dr. Laurie Santos?
Oh, Gosh, we could be on here all day. I would have a lot of questions for her between raising 3 teenagers through smartphones. Laurie's way smarter than me. I have a
Laurie, what
13-year-old,
advice would you
so
have
I'm
for?
super-
'Cause I see this. This is an example. Laurie. I just saw this this year, and I will pull it up real quick. Let me pull up the article. So I'm not going to mention who it is. I'm
No,
not
of
gonna,
course,
I'm not
we
gonna,
would never do that.
But this is a very serious one. Let me see. This would be there's one of my clients. His daughter, and this all came out in the news. Very, very bad thing. But she had a friend come over to her house, and she was getting ready for school, and her friend took naked photos of her when she didn't know her friend. She was getting ready, and she didn't know.
Okay,
and so her friend posted these on Google. And this is the friend.
A friend.
The friend texted and said, "Hey, send this to 10 people. Let's see if the whole school can find out before school starts," or something like that. And it went out to a ton of people.
Oh, my.
And this person came to school to discover that every single person had seen her naked.
Oh, that's just horrible.
And
awful.
so, horrible situation. And I thought, man, that's unusual. He was sharing this story with somebody, and then at the conference a couple back, another guy came up to me and said it happened to his kid too. What advice would you have for someone who's living just an absolute digital dystopia due to some people ripping on them online? You mentioned people not liking your hair. You know what I mean? How do you process that? What advice would you have?
Yeah, it's really awful. I mean, I think, parents can set the tone with, how they talk about like using media and stuff like that. I mean, I think one thing is just like, I think, these kinds of tools can be used badly. If I was a parent, I would hold off as long as possible for giving kids these phones and so on, and then really talk to them about the kinds of things they can be used for. Another thing you can do is to try to like reach out across the line and not do it over digital, but do it in real life. You know what I mean? I think one of the consequences that we see of such like polarization on Twitter and on social media and things is like people don't realize there are real people behind it. Like I was saying, people email me like, you have stupid hair. Sometimes I'll write them back and be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, thank you. And then they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think anybody would ever read that email. It's like, I didn't really think there was a person behind these kind of mean tweets or these mean Facebook posts. And so I think, the more we can do to like connect with other people in real life, we can start to overcome some of the anonymity and the kinds of bad stuff that we get from doing everything online.
Clay, we've got a rule in our house with, we've got right now they're a little older, 22, 19, and 13. But a rule in our house is the kids aren't allowed to post on social media anything about our family without the approval of that other person. So we don't deal with that issue, like an older brother teasing a younger sister, making fun of each other.
Yeah, Z has a rule, and the rule is you just don't talk about people that aren't present. But Z, I'll just show you the story so you can see this.
Yeah.
But it's, I think a lot of people digitally talk about people that aren't present. I think that's a move. I think people go on social media. It's not a good move, but it's a move people are doing.
It is a move, and it's just the smartphone where it's taking people the way that you can have these conversations and not have conversations. You can make comments that you kind of hide
go on
behind
Reddit
something.
and the truth about working for
I know
Dr.
it
Silder.
just wears one out, and you know that there's nothing really healthy about it, and you see that, right, Dr. Santos? You see that maybe it comes in your class because they know that mental illness is spiking, is on its way up. We know that people are unhappier now than they've ever been. We know these things, and yet it all draws back to the old way of doing things, doesn't it? It always goes back to having relationships and spending time with people you like, and building good, deep, solid relationships. I'm sure you probably integrate this in your class, but the Harvard study that's followed all those grown men now for all these 80 some odd years, 100 years, something. Are you familiar with the study I'm talking about?
Yeah, totally. It started in the 1930s and 40s, and then they've been tracking people since then. So their cohort that started, when they were in college are now in their 80s and 90s. And what's cool about the study is they look at all these different things about these people's lives, how much money they made and so on. And they have the study was super interesting because it had a whole gamut of people. Like John F. Kennedy was one of the original subjects in the study, right? So it's like they had like the presidents, to people who were low income and all this stuff. And what they find is that, what makes people happy is social connection. It's like their networks and their connections with other people. But it doesn't
And that's
just
not
make people
that's not
happy.
being an Instagram friend. Maybe because kids
Yeah,
listening
it's
to
like
this may
in
go,
real life kinds of connections, right? It's like people's actual social networks of the people they can call upon, if they're having a bad day and need some support. But the more amazing thing is it doesn't just affect people's happiness levels, it affects people's health. So whether
Right.
you get diabetes, whether you get
Yes.
cancer, whether you have immune dysfunction, like that is related to how much social connection you have, such that people who are more connected are healthier. They live longer, which is crazy. And we're, kind of in some ways giving that up on our own accord, like we're the ones who choose to like scroll our Instagram feed rather than calling
Yeah.
a friend over for, a drink or something. And so like in some ways we're giving this up willingly, which is really disturbing.
It is. It's almost like you're back in I'm not sure exactly what decade, and cigarette smoking is just exploding. And you're looking at everybody going, this isn't good.
This is not good.
The studies show that this is not heading in the right direction. Put down that thing called a cigarette, and yet people just, now it took a lot of damage, a lot of lawsuits. I mean, a lot of stuff that's gone on to where, I know
this just in. Smoking is bad.
I know it's gone, it's gone up and down. I mean, the social persona of it, though, sometimes
I didn't know it was bad. I couldn't tell. I love the way I cough. It is so sexy.
I gotta clear my throat. Hold on one second. Yeah, hold on. Yeah.
but
Mike my stoma. Mike my stoma.
I feel like we're in the early days of the tobacco companies. It's kind of like this is not going in the right direction. This is not good. And so
I want to end the show by praising our guest here, because you said somebody ripped on your hair. So I have 5 positive things I'd like to say about you that are true, and you can just take it and you can't stop me. Here we go. 1, you've got phenomenal hair.
she does.
Phenomenal hair. And if the listeners will Google Dr. Laurie Santos and do it,
got a great
look
smile,
for
too. Look at that
Chartwell
smile.
speakers there. You can see the head. Great hair.
Beautiful.
Second,
Pretty lady.
you got the
Amen.
most
Amen.
viewed class of all time at Harvard, the most attended
Yale.
class.
Yeah.
Yale. What am I
Preach it,
saying?
brother.
Sorry.
Preach it.
Yale.
Close. He's
That's
close.
awesome.
He's close on this.
3, you spent your time studying something that makes a lot of other people happy.
Yeah.
Hey, good.
So you didn't study like the keys to making Dr. Laurie, look
Money
better or
quick.
make more money quicker.
Get rich quick at Yale University.
4 is you were honest about the number of people attending the Yale games. Because a lot of times I can't get a straight answer out of people.
Yeah, we can't get a straight answer.
Honesty.
And 5, the fact that you
smells
would
like
put
lavender.
your course
Oh,
up
wait,
for
no.
free for people to consume or to have or to make available. The whole thing, yes, well done. Holy crap. Holy cow. I can't believe it. Mega points everywhere. I want to talk into a ceiling fan about how much I love today's interview. Z, I can't handle it. So good.
It is so good. And the fact about it, that saving grace is that now you can actually access her class and not have to get rejected by yet another university is exciting.
Sir, you have a 19 on your ACT. You can't take the class.
You've taken it 42
But
times.
you're saying I can now.
But you're
No ACTs, no Yale tuition, it's a pretty sweet deal.
that's
Laurie,
the sweetest deal ever.
You are a great American, and I'm going to really kind of grow out my hair and up my hair game to see if I can compete with you for our next interview.
Fantastic. I look forward to it.
All right. Well, you take care.
Thanks so much. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for being on the show. Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you, Laurie.
Bye. And now, without any further ado, 3, 2, 1.